Good day, everyone, and welcome to Build 2021. My name is Frank Cerrone. I am a senior director in Snowflake's finance group with a focus on helping our customers strategize on their business and pricing models. I'm joined today by my colleague, Matt Hill.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Matt Hill, and I lead our data application sales strategy at Snowflake.
We wanted to spend some time today talking about SaaS pricing models in the market in general, but more specifically, some of the experiences that we're having with our customers as they go to market on the Snowflake platform. First, a bit of history on the SaaS business. As many of you probably know, the SaaS pricing models have been around for decades. They actually started in the 1960s. But a company that came to market in 1999 called Salesforce was the first pure play SaaS subscription model in a public company that came to the market. What's starting to happen now as these companies transform their business models, and certainly the success that Snowflake has had, you're seeing this increase and surge in usage-based pricings. Traditional SaaS models have largely been subscription billing-based models where someone pays for access on a recurring basis, when in fact, today, the way Snowflake's gone to market and some of the other companies that are coming to market recently, many of these companies are migrating to a usage-based model, which we want to talk about today. Just to give you a little bit of flavor of what's happening in the industry, aside from Snowflake, there's been several very successful companies that have gone public at large multiples to their revenue stream, most of which have been around this usage-based pricing model. Just to give you a sense of the magnitude of success, today, setting Snowflake aside even, there's been probably about a 7x multiple increase for the companies that have gone public under a usage model. The market has very much adopted this strategy as a leading strategy for pricing. And as you are considering building your product, it's certainly worthwhile to understand the premium that you might attract if you're able to build a usage-based pricing structure. A little bit around sort of the customer benefits. Obviously, we all enjoy premiums in our pricing and our stock price goes up, which is great. But from the customer's perspective, it's important to understand what their experience is like and how positive it's been, at least for Snowflake, in building a usage model. Customers typically struggle with some of the traditional subscription models. And what they found is that if we come to market with a pay-for-use model, they quickly can correlate product usage to pricing and can come up with a methodology that makes sense for them, that isn't onerous or viewed as overpaying, since they're only paying for what they use. The control of the budget suddenly shifts to the customer's backyard from yours as the developer or the go-to-market product company. The control mechanism for them quickly becomes, how much do I really want to expand this use case or other use cases with your product? And since I'm only paying for what I use, as I expand these, my budget will ramp up or down almost on demand based upon my sort of dictating which direction I want to take my business. It's taken a lot of risk out of the sizing of a contract. One of the conflict points that's pretty common in going to market with any kind of a subscription model is helping describe to an end user customer how to guesstimate the number of users or the number of features or whatever the other metric is that the company prices around, how to size that in their environment, especially for a new software product that they really haven't deployed yet. Taking the risk out of this sizing exercise allows your customers to sort of flex up and down as needed and almost on demand within their own environment. And then the last point, and maybe the best one from a customer's perspective, is a very low entry point to the product. They no longer have to think about I only want certain features, or I want to narrow down certain capabilities to keep my costs down. Rather, I'm getting access to a pretty robust product at a very low cost based upon how you might structure your usage. What are some of the strategies that we've seen in deploying a usage model, and maybe some things for you all to consider as you are contemplating how you want to go to market? 3 of them come to mind that really rose to the top as we started to talk about going to market with a usage model. First and foremost, probably the most important, you need to be really thoughtful around identifying a usage-based metric that creates value for your customer. I'm going to make an assumption that, of course, you're starting with a really good product to begin with. And if you have a good product, what drives value from your customer's perspective? Our recommendation would be really try to keep it simple and very measurable, so you can actually put some predictions around it, but very much value-based, not cost-plus based, but a value driver metric that as customers enjoy benefit, you also enjoy an uplift in your revenue. The second thing to think about is your sales origination process, and frankly, maybe the mix of your sales team is going to change a little bit. Compensation structures are going to change a little bit. No longer are you rewarding a salesperson for just finding a new relationship. Finding a new relationship in a usage model doesn't really generate any revenue. So the reality is, until that customer adopts and expands the business, you haven't really generated revenue for the company yet. So be thoughtful around how you structure compensation for your sales teams. Certainly, rewarding someone for signing up a new customer is tantamount to success. So you need to do that, but it's a leading indicator to the future. Think really hard about how you would support your sales reps on an ongoing basis to drive expansion within your customer base. And the last one, and an important one, is help your customers size their contracts. It may be counterintuitive to think of it this way, but you as a developer really own the ultimate responsibility to help customers be better users. And that includes optimizing their environment or your product for their environment. At first, that might seem troubling because your revenue might actually dip a bit. But if your product's a good one and it's expanding, the amount of use cases within the organization will more than compensate for whatever you're doing to help the customer optimize. And more importantly, customers will certainly appreciate you supporting them as a partner. As I mentioned before, there's been a bunch of successful companies that have come to market as SaaS providers lately that have done it under a usage model. And they're building it around very simple value metrics. This is just a sort of a snapshot. Of course, Snowflake. You're building on our platform right now as we speak. Ours is a query-based platform. That's a metric that we found works as a value metric, and consequently, we've organized our entire company around that metric in delivering our presence in the market today. These other companies have done something similar. HubSpot is number of marketing contacts. And as you can see, various other metrics, pretty simple to understand across the industry, are how people are organizing how they go to market. Now, many of these had an opportunity early in their life cycle to make this transition if they were transitioning from a traditional subscription model to a usage model. Of course, Snowflake's was a early stage, sort of clean slate of paper business model. And so it was native from the get-go. Other organizations, including yours, might not be in that situation. So some of these might require you to be thoughtful around how you might transition to a hybrid type model that includes both a base licensing subscription charge as well as a usage-based charge. So you really need to be thinking about how is it you want to approach that in your own specific situation. There's a lot of benefits, of course, to being a shareholder in a company with a usage model. I just thought I'd share with you a little bit of specifics around, what's the difference in terms of revenue recognition as you start to think through a usage model. First and foremost, you got to pick the right model. As you can see on the headlines on the right, talking about the right metric has been a lot of the buzz in the industry. There was a conference recently, that Bessemer held called State of the Cloud in 2021. Lots of discussion around what's the right usage metric to build into your pricing model. Companies with usage-based pricing are growing faster than companies in a traditional subscription model. And you saw some of those headlines at the beginning of the presentation. What's the biggest difference? In a subscription model, your revenue is recognized on a straight line basis. That is, whatever your contract is that you sign up with a customer in that year, divided by 12 months, if it's an annual contract, becomes how you recognize revenue. In a usage model, it's quite different. In fact, in a usage model, when you sign up a customer, the very, very beginning, you literally have no revenue. So until the customer onboards and adopts and begins to build out their use of your product within their enterprise, you will really experience probably less revenue than you typically would in a subscription model. However, as adoption expands throughout the customer, what we found and what others in usage models have found, that the actual usage far exceeds any revenue you would recognize in a straight line sort of a business model, because adoption is getting wider within the organization, which has this inherent retentive value around how customers use the product in their specific use cases. I thought I'd share with you just some of the Snowflake metrics. This is public information, so there's nothing proprietary here. When we get in front of our investor community, there's a few points that really rise to the occasion at the very, very top of the discussion around valuation. Obvious one is, how many customers have you added in your business? And so something that you'll all be measuring no matter what your pricing model is. How many customers are generating more than $1 million? And then the last one, and probably the most important one, is what's the net revenue retention, or sometimes called net dollar retention, that you as a company are experiencing with your product in the market? These are actual numbers. And so in our example, Snowflake's experiencing a 169% net revenue retention. What does that mean? That means that for a customer that's been in our organization for at least 2 years or longer, we're finding that their second year revenue usage is 169% greater than their previous year. Remember the curve I just showed you sort of starts low at the bottom, traditional sort of bell-shaped curve, has a tendency to ramp up as adoption expands. That's the ultimate sort of sign that customers are not only enjoying the product, but they're spreading it widely within their organization. This is sort of an example of what we've learned as we've walked through usage models with other customers, as well as our own model. The life cycle of a customer, although it'll be somewhat unique to your specific product that you're taking to market, will follow a pretty similar profile. You'll experience an on-demand or an entry-level relationship where you're developing proof of concept, where you're really proving out, does your product meet the goals of what the customer is trying to accomplish? And as they come to the conclusion that it does, you'll sign your first contract. Typically not a very long contract. It might only be as short as a year. It might be even less depending on your product. And what you'll find is that adoption of the product during this period of time might be a bit slow. Customer needs to fit it into their development cycle. They need to get it rolled out to their employee base. It'll take a little bit to get it started, but as it accelerates and optimizes, you'll find that you'll reach a sort of a steady state. And then beyond that, as the customer matures, you'll see broader expansion across the enterprise that will start to geometrically grow your revenue. The important point around this is, how do you predict what a customer is going to use in the usage model? It's a challenge. There are ways to do it. You need to build a model that fits your go-to-market strategy. But for every single customer that will engage in the relationship with you, their usage data and profiles will be sort of the inputs for any kind of predictive modeling you're going to do around usage. Each of those customers will always exhibit very unique behavior. And in the early stages, since you really don't have a whole lot of experience with these new customers yet, you're going to use existing customers you might have in your business already to cross-learn some information about a customer's usage pattern and to use that to extrapolate across the rest of the organizations that you're doing business with to help you better predict what your usage profile might look like. Couple of sort of learnings from our experience in the usage world today. Generally speaking, almost to a person, customer usage will not follow a straight line pattern. So your revenue recognition will dip a bit, and then it will start to come up the curve, just as I displayed to you previously. Customers exhibit very large variation depending on where they are in the technical deployment of the product, organizational politics, whatever is driving their adoption will create sort of unique variation within each customer. Customer usage over time will start to get offset as you optimize. What that means is, as you optimize your product, you actually might short-term take down some of your usage or revenue, but long-term, as the use cases expand, you'll actually see an improvement in revenue. Plan for the short-term dips and prepare for the expansion in the out years. Contract sizing is an art and not a science. It is difficult, especially in a new relationship, to predict what a customer is going to do. As much as you can learn from your other customers within your portfolio of customers, but ultimately you need to get started building a history and a track record at the customer level. And then lastly, and something that sort of maybe might be intuitive, there are sort of systematic and unsystematic factors that drive usage trends. There's macroeconomic trends that drive behavior, just like there is unique trends for your product within a customer base. COVID, a hurricane, a natural disaster, all these kinds of things, a recession, they're going to drive usage behaviors within your customer base. Those type of systematic risks, you really never get rid of. However, as you expand and mature and scale your customer base, you'll find that the unsystematic or the ones unique to a customer will largely start to cancel themselves out across your own customer base, giving you better predictability to your revenue stream. And with that, I'm going to flip it to my colleague, Matt, to talk about an example of a model on Snowflake.
Thanks, Frank. And that's some really great information. I'd like to build upon the Snowflake example by taking a look at Twilio, who actually spoke earlier at the Build conference. So you can check that session out if you missed it. Twilio uses a hybrid pricing strategy. So customers make a commitment based on usage and plan type, and then they can exceed that plan with additional per usage charges. Importantly, as Frank mentioned, they also offer a free tier to encourage customers to try the service and see the value for themselves before actually making a commitment. Twilio marketing campaign has two value metrics they charge on: number of contacts and number of emails sent. You can see the explosive growth that they've experienced in the past 18 months, which should not surprise anyone that follows their stock. Contacts have grown by more than 4x to 850 million, and the number of emails sent has grown by more than 36x to a whopping 27.8 billion emails. There are a number of technical benefits that Twilio has realized by running on Snowflake, and you can hear that directly from them in their recorded session. Today, what I really want to focus on is how Snowflake's usage-based model complements this pricing strategy. First is understanding how to align the Snowflake cost to ensure that margins aren't inadvertently impacted. Twilio knows that each contact load and segmentation, as well as each email sent, correlates to the amount of compute required to process and store those events. While not the full COGS of running their service, this provides excellent predictability of the Snowflake costs as they understand what will be required to support the customer plans that they have sold. It is also important to understand that Snowflake's elastic scalability and usage-based pricing allows Twilio to scale based on their clients' usage patterns. For example, they don't have to invest in excessive infrastructure to handle peak seasonality of Black Friday, which would then sit idle during much of the year. Additionally, they can segment different sized clients to the appropriately sized infrastructure to ensure that they're always meeting the SLAs. Adding to this is the idea that Twilio's investment in Snowflake grows as their usage increases. They are using the exact same product as they initially invested in years ago, but have only been required to increase their commitment to Snowflake as their customers adopted more of their products and that usage grew. Lastly is the fact that not all Twilio products run on Snowflake today, and they continue to innovate and develop new functionality as well. As they look to expand their Snowflake footprint with these additional offerings, they have a low cost of development because they don't have to invest in additional licenses or infrastructure builds. Developers can access compute and storage on an as-needed basis, paying per second when they want to run tests against Snowflake. Now I'd like to transition to talk about some additional revenue models that our customers are deploying as a byproduct of having their applications built on Snowflake. These are all models that are unique to Snowflake because of our data sharing capability. What this allows customers to do is eliminate the typical process of sending and receiving data through APIs, blob storage dumps, and SFTP. All these methods require additional technologies, processes, and people to support. Even when they're working, there are limits on how much data can be moved and at what frequency. Instead, with Snowflake's multi-tenant approach, a provider can simply grant another Snowflake customer access to view and query the provider's data directly, obviously with all the security controls you'd expect. This data can be joined to other internal data that the customer has for further analytic use cases, and because the data is not copied or moved, it is always fresh and up to date. So how do app builders monetize on this? First, there is our data marketplace where providers can advertise and list public data sets to the nearly 5,000 Snowflake customers. This could be benchmark data, anonymized data from the application, etc. FactSet is a great example of a company that has a multitude of listings on the marketplace today. Additionally, we have seen that SaaS applications are becoming the new data silos, and companies are trying to figure out how to consolidate this data internally. Using a direct share, which can also be listed in the marketplace, providers can give their customers direct access to their unique data from the application. Braze is an example of a customer that has built both direct and marketplace listings. In either example, Snowflake has a monetization feature that lets the provider charge per query based on a fixed monthly usage or a combination of the two. Additionally, providers can contract directly with their customers for flat rate pricing. A huge plus is there's no additional cost to the provider for sharing data. It is a simple grant to open access. The last example is what we call a reader account. We often hear from application providers that their customers love the product, but they'd like to bring their own BI tool, analyze the data a little differently, or even bring their own ML and AI models to the data. If the end customer is not on Snowflake, the provider can create an additional Snowflake account, share the client's specific data to that account, and provide full access for the customer to query that data and do what they want. There are additional costs associated with the reader account because every time that end customer runs a query, it consumes compute resources. This is individually tracked by Snowflake, and providers are charging directly for that usage, set a flat rate with limits that Snowflake monitors, or a combination of the two. Seismic is a good example of a client using direct data sharing and reader accounts. So what are the key takeaways? First, as Frank showed, investors are rewarding these models because of the growth and net revenue retention rate that these models drive. Second, selecting the key value metric or metrics is the key to making this work. When done properly, it creates a natural alignment between the vendor and customer that contribute to these sticky relationships. Lastly, Snowflake is uniquely positioned to support these go-to-market models because of our single platform approach, usage-based pricing, and data sharing. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this session. I wish you the best of luck as you continue to navigate and evolve your pricing strategies.